This video is sponsored by Surfshark. Hello my beautiful watchers. Being pissed that J.K. Rowling is at it again is probably not the healthiest motivation a fellow could have to expand his literary horizons, but I am honestly grateful for whatever reason led me to the subject of today's review because it was just really enjoyable and a wonderful end to the palate cleansing I've been allowing myself before jumping back into more stressful reviews. Let's do this. Dreadnought is a 2017 young adult superhero novel written by American author April Daniels. It is the first of currently just 2 books in an ongoing series about a 15-year-old trans girl who, through a twist of fate, inherits the powers and legacy of the world's most famous and beloved superhero, and, as an unexpected but much appreciated side effect, is instantly magically transitioned into a conventionally super attractive female form. The book seems to have been pretty well received overall, and ended up being a Literary Award finalist. I'm feeling doubly out of my depth on this one. I possess a, at best, average knowledge of the superhero genre and the comics it primarily exists in, and I have exactly zero first-hand knowledge of the trans experience. Regarding the former, I'm probably still going to be making a few comparisons to the other superhero worlds that I do know of, just because it makes things easier to explain. Because of the latter, I obviously can't make any expert judgments on the realism of the trials and tribulations the lead character faces in that regard, but I can at least still describe them to you, and you know, no book is ever about only one thing. There's still plenty of stuff here I think I can be insightful about. The super condensed description of this book, the kind that I might type into the limited available characters of Twitter, or yell to the retreating back of a friend who is running to catch a bus, is, it's kind of like a cross between Into the Spider-Verse and My Hero Academia with a trans hero. You should seriously try it! Oh no, he missed his bus. Neither of those comparisons are an accusation of plagiarism, by the way. Even a comic Luddite like myself knows that the events I'm referring to are pretty common superhero tropes. I'm going to begin with a synopsis of the start of the story, but I will try to be as spoiler light as possible because this is another book that I really hope that you will try for yourselves, and I don't want to ruin any big plot twists. The world of Dreadnought is a pretty standard superhero setup. It's basically our world, but a small percentage of the population have superhuman abilities, and a small percentage of them are made so powerful by them they have taken to fighting crime, saving people from disasters, and, you know, rescuing the world from peril and whatnot. And of course, where there's great power to be had, there's people who will abuse it for their own gain. So, there's supervillains making everyone's lives pretty sucky at times. There's a pretty close parody of the DC Justice League called the Legion Pacifica, headed by a Superman stand-in called Dreadnought. The other members of the Legion appear to be either original creations or parodies or amalgamations of other famous comic characters with varying levels of subtlety, but I will not embarrass myself by trying to break down each one with my limited experience. Dreadnought is the third known incarnation of this superhero, as his powers can apparently be transferred to someone else upon his death, kinda like All Might from My Hero Academia, but not a secret. Danielle Tozer, usually known as Danny to her friends, is a transgender lesbian struggling to stay alive in this world, not because of any superhuman threat, but due to the oppressive misery of living with a highly abusive father and the rampant dysphoria she feels at having to stay in the closet and present male to avoid worsening his treatment of her. She happens to be nearby when Dreadnought is fatally wounded by a new upcoming supervillain. She tries to help him, but he knows he's on the way out, so to keep the legend of Dreadnought going, he transfers his powers to her. One of the many things the mantle of Dreadnought does is transform one's outer body into whatever the host considers to be their ideal form. In the cases of past heroes, it's just made them tall, square-jawed, and muscular, but because Danielle is trans, she's transformed into a stunningly pretty teen girl. She's overwhelmingly happy and grateful and not opposed to taking on the responsibilities of a superhero, but she quickly discovers that being the most powerful being on the planet isn't a guarantee that all of your problems will go away, and the world isn't necessarily any more willing to accept her for who she is now than before. For one thing, in a shock twist, when she's recruited by the Legion, it turns out that a core member is a hardcore TERF, which is just unbelievably sucky. Worse, the other members of the Legion, all great heroes known for standing up for justice, kindness, and freedom, seem much more inclined to try to talk, cajole, guilt, and generally persuade Danny into being okay with fighting alongside this transphobe than they are willing to even consider cutting their ties with the transphobe. Because of this, Danny finds it much more agreeable to team up with an independent vigilante crime fighter around her own age. Unfortunately, because her father's abuse takes the form of constant screaming fits and verbal takedowns, being more powerful than a battleship and faster than a jet doesn't really fix anything there. Things then escalate continuously from there with both the transgender and superhero related stuff. According to April, despite the fact that it might limit her audience, Dreadnought was always intended to be a book by a trans person about a trans hero for trans people to get enjoyment from and take comfort in, and while she more than welcomes cis readers, she never felt inclined to write a single word for the sole purpose of making it more accessible to them. Speaking as a cis male, I still found it very engaging despite my lack of personal connection to the subject matter. She also described her book as a pretty clear-cut trans power fantasy, and I mean, yeah, superpowers is pretty much everyone's power fantasy, but I can also certainly understand the appeal of a seamless, painless, instantaneous transition. Ms. Daniels has also stated that while she drew heavily from her own experience with transitioning, her protagonist and her story is much more of an amalgamation of multiple trans people that she researched with than a direct insert. She also makes it clear that despite this, she never intended Danielle to be representative of every trans experience, even excluding the superhero stuff. The impression I got from the superhero side of things is, even though it's a genre that's currently sorely lacking for trans representation, April is a very positive and knowledgeable fan of it, certainly enough to know all of the tropes and which ones she likes. The result is the book reads much more like a love letter than a takedown. I found the ways that the different superheroes reacted to Dani being transgender depressing, but also kind of fascinating because of how well thought out that plot seemed to be. What I mean is, the superheroes whose powers came from science, you know, your Mr. Fantastic or Doc Ock lookalikes, were much more accepting of her gender identity because they understood a lot more of the up-to-date realities of it, while the before-mentioned TERF's power was magic-based, and as a result she was a lot more old-school in her belief system. The story was nuanced as heck in a lot of other ways too. Every time I thought it was about to take a black and white stance on something, it caught me off guard with layers of the kind of frustrating uncertainty that you get in real life all too often. There were a lot of negatives to living day-to-day life presenting female that caught Danielle completely off guard because she had unwittingly been very used to a certain amount of male privilege. For one thing, the guy who used to be her best friend is a raving misogynist and hardcore creep who acts entitled to sex from every woman around him. She just genuinely hadn't noticed or hadn't really thought about how unpleasant that makes him to be around until she was on the receiving end of it. This is absolutely not to be confused with transition regret. At no point does truly experiencing the full crushing rate of everyday sexism for the first time make Danielle less sure of her gender identity, and she rightly points out to people that her lack of experience with it until now is through no fault of her own. This book is fairly evenly split between the struggles that Dani faces due to being trans and the struggles she faces trying to stop the whole world from dying horribly, and the two of them don't always directly tie into each other. For once, I think this lack of cohesion might actually be a good thing. The hardships that arise from Danielle being transgender, the TERF superhero, and her friends and parents make her life bloody miserable, but they are not the reason that she struggles to save the world. She struggles to save the world because the threat she ends up facing is exceptionally terrible, and it overwhelms the good guys so hard and so fast, even if they had been working together in perfect harmony, there's no guarantee things would have gone any better. While finding the self-confidence to believe that she can truly become Dreadnought is a struggle for her, Danielle's dysmorphia and the transphobia she faces are not treated as obstacles in the way of saving the world. They are their own thing that require their own solutions, or unfortunately lack thereof. And likewise, saving the world doesn't magically fix any of her other hardships. It doesn't even earn her the respect of the TERF Legion member. Dani has to learn one of the hardest lessons anyone can learn, that she has to love herself and not chase the validation of others. Another thing I noticed was very prominent in Dani's new life was the constant fear that even superpowered as she was, there might be some way for someone to take her womanhood away from her, and it really drove home for me how awful it must be to feel like an essential part of oneself is somewhat out of your hands and considered to be so open for debate. Again, I can't personally attest to the realism of this, but it did hit me hard to see how much worse it broke Dani's heart when her allies were thoughtlessly kind of shit compared to the outright bigotry she sometimes faced, as she was fairly numb to that at this point. There was the hero's before mentioned unwillingness to consider disassociating themselves with a transphobe, and her otherwise very loving mother pitying her son and blaming herself for turning her into something unnatural. There was also a very sad moment early on when the Legion hero who bonded with her the quickest, who was a sort of doctor and slightly mad scientist type, performs a medical exam on her and shows that the magic that changed Danny couldn't give her a uterus or change the fact that she had a Y chromosome. While the doc correctly assures her that that is not the defining factor in what makes someone a woman, she also immediately shares this info with the other heroes, and it gives the turf or the ammo she needs to call the poor girl a freak. This part of the book was a hard reminder to me, and I hope anyone else that considers themselves an ally, that we have the potential to hurt our LGBTQ friends so badly because they have put their trust in us, and it's really important to try not to do something thoughtless that would betray that trust. I do want to mention that Danny's trans story isn't all stress and sadness. It was uplifting to read through the sheer joy that she feels post-transition as she finally starts to feel comfortable in the body she's in, not horrified by what she sees in the mirror, and gets to go and buy women's clothing and shoes for the first time. There's a few plot threads left unfinished by the end, as it is in a series, but it still has a satisfying ending as a standalone book. I'm planning to order the sequel because I really liked this, but if you choose to just read the first one, you're not going to feel like you only read part of a story. I have to admit, I'm very curious as to why the first two books in the series were published within months of each other in 2017, but the third has yet to surface. I was even tempted to tweet to Ms. Daniels and ask her directly, but apparently her account was suspended for saying mean things about ice. Ain't that a son of a bitch? Anyways, all in all, I would definitely recommend this book. As April herself has attested to, there is probably no more a universal trans experience than any other human experience. As a species, we are just too bloody unique. That said, I am grateful for the insight that I think that I have gotten from this book about some of the pains and joys of life as a trans person. My recommendation also extends to fans of superhero stories, especially if they enjoy nuance and mature themes without it being grimdark and gritty. I think it super stands up in this genre in its own right, and just in general, April is a really talented author. I don't know about anyone else, but man, I would kill to see this book adapted into a film someday. If any of my trans beautiful watchers would like to weigh in on some of the things that I've mentioned with an actual expert opinion, you can comment, catch me on Twitter, or email me at this address. And now, a word about our sponsor. Surfshark is an affordable and reliable VPN and my personal go-to for the dual purposes of protecting my information online and bypassing the ridiculous geographic location-based restrictions placed on streamed media. In this day and age, internet security is of ever-increasing importance at home and especially when connected to public Wi-Fi. Your passwords, private information, and even identity are often vulnerable to jerk-faced jerks who want to collect them and sell them for profit. Surfshark protects you from said jerk-faced jerks by directing all of your internet activity through one of their secure servers located around the world and encrypting all outgoing and incoming data. An additional advantage that comes with these worldwide servers is they can fool most streaming websites into thinking you're located in another country. This is extremely useful because movies and TV shows can sometimes end up being owned by different distribution companies in different countries, and as a result, what is available on Netflix to my brethren back in the UK might not be available to people in the US and vice versa. In this event, you can fire up Surfshark, choose an appropriate server, and enjoy to your heart's content. If you follow the link in the video description or go to surfshark.deal/Dominic Noble and use the code Dominic Noble, you can get 83% off a 2-year plan and 3 extra months for free. Thank you for joining me, my beautiful watchers. Just the usual reminder that if you enjoyed this episode, it would be a huge help to the channel analytics if you would be willing to click the like button, comment, share with your friends, and subscribe if you're new. Please take care of yourselves out there, and I will see you soon.
You try to make yourself feel better by taking me down. Once I fell, but now I'm strong. I'm ready for the rematch. Shoot me down, don't you know I get up? Yeah, baby, I will fight. No, there ain't nothing stopping me. I'm bulletproof, I won't fall. I'm bulletproof, go on and shoot me down. I will always get up.
Much love and appreciation to my patrons of honor, Shelby Holtz, Sam Cucinotta, and Atel Spurdloff, and special thanks to this video's co-producer, Kate Robinson. Be sure to check out her channel for more of that sweet, sweet YouTube content. According to April, there were, make words good, Don. I've just realised I've written Surfshake. This Surfshake protects you from internet nasties. Delicious.